Maya spent 3 agonizing years fighting stage 3 melanoma, scraping together every dollar for one final life saving surgery. But her mother in law, Beatrice, decided Maya's medical fund was better spent on a royal wedding for her favorite daughter, leaving Maya with a $12 balance and a death sentence. Beatrice thought Maya would suffer in silence, but she forgot one thing. Maya is a forensic auditor, and she was about to perform the most public audit of Beatrice's life. But the clearest way to understand this story is to hear Maya describe it herself.
Hello, my name is Maya, and for the last 36 months, my life has been measured in the cold, metallic taste of chemotherapy and the relentless ticking of hospital clocks. When you're diagnosed with stage 3 melanoma at 28, the world stops being about dreams and starts being about math. It's about blood cell counts, survival percentages, and, most importantly, the cost of staying alive. I'm a forensic auditor by trade. My entire professional life is built on a single, unwavering truth. Numbers never lie, but people do. I spend 40 hours a week digging through shell companies and offshore accounts to find the money people try to bury. I'm good at it because I'm patient, I'm meticulous, and I know exactly where the bodies are hidden in a balance sheet. I just never expected to find a corpse in my own marriage. At home, I tried to leave the auditor at the door. I wanted to be the lucky one, the wife who survived the big C and came out the other side with her husband David by her side. David was my rock during the first 2 surgeries, or at least that's what I told myself. He held my hand when my hair fell out in clumps, and he promised me that we'd get through it. But as I moved into remission, I became something else to his family, an expensive inconvenience. I had one final hurdle, a $52,400 clearance fund. This wasn't just savings, it was my life insurance. It was for a complex reconstructive and preventative surgery scheduled for next month to ensure the margins were clear and the cancer wouldn't come screaming back. I spent 3 years building that fund. I took every freelance gig I could find, worked through nausea that made my eyes bleed, and skipped every holiday. I lived on coffee and spreadsheets so that I could one day wake up and not be afraid of my own skin. I thought David and I were a fortress. I thought we were protecting that fund together. I was wrong. I was about to learn that in the hierarchy of the St. Clair family, my life was worth significantly less than a custom-made silk veil. To understand why I didn't see this coming, you have to understand the St. Clair family hierarchy. At the top sits Beatrice, a woman who treats social status like a competitive sport. Below her is Chloe, the golden child. Chloe is 30 years old and has the professional resume of a high school sophomore. She's never held a job for more than a few months because, according to Beatrice, Chloe is too creative for the corporate grind. For years, I was the one filling the gaps. Last Christmas, Chloe's credit card debt hit a breaking point. $4,000 she'd spent on designer boots and influencer brunches. Beatrice came to me, eyes brimming with performative tears, saying it would break Chloe's spirit to face a collections agency. So I paid it. I bailed her out of her car payments in April. I paid for the engagement brunch in June. I did it because I loved David, and I thought that by being a good daughter-in-law, I was buying myself a place in a family that would protect me when I was at my weakest. Then came the royal wedding. Chloe managed to snag a local heir named Marcus, a man whose family name is plastered on half the libraries in the state. For Beatrice, this wasn't just a wedding, it was her coronation. She became obsessed with the St. Clair Wedding of the Year. Every conversation was about the venue, the $5,000 floral wall, and the imported Italian lace. I remember sitting at Sunday dinner, my skin still pale from a recent scan, listening to Beatrice complain that the $150 a plate catering felt cheap. "Maya," she said, looking at me with that thin, painted-on smile, "you're so lucky you're in remission now. You don't have to worry about all this stress. It's Chloe's turn to shine. We really need this day to be perfect to show Marcus's family who we are." I just nodded, sipping my water. I felt like a ghost at the table. To Beatrice, my cancer was an embarrassing inconvenience. It was a dark cloud that threatened to rain on Chloe's parade. She would ask me if I could wear a little more blush, because my paleness looked unhealthy in the family photos. I didn't care about the photos. I cared about the surgery. I cared about the $52,400 that represented my future. I had been so careful. David and I had a joint emergency fund account. It was the only account we shared, specifically designed so he could access the money if I were incapacitated during my treatment. I trusted him with the keys to my life because I thought he valued my heartbeat more than his sister's vanity. I was the giver. They were the takers. And the thing about takers is that they never know when to stop until they've taken everything you have left to give. The betrayal didn't arrive with a bang. It arrived with a polite, automated declined on a keypad. It was Tuesday morning. I had my hospital bag half packed in the trunk of my car, feeling a rare surge of hope. I walked into the surgical billing department at the oncology center, a place that usually smells like antiseptic and anxiety, to put down the $15,000 deposit for my procedure. This was the point of no return payment. Once this was in, my surgical team was locked, the OR was booked, and my life was officially back on the calendar. I handed the clerk my card. She swiped it. Declined. "That's impossible," I said, my voice small. "Check it again. It's a high-limit savings debit." She tried again. Declined. A cold sweat broke out on the back of my neck. I pulled up my banking app, my fingers trembling so hard I mistyped my passcode twice. When the screen finally loaded, the air left my lungs. The balance in our emergency surgery account, which should have been sitting at a solid $52,412, was now exactly $12.42. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just stared at the screen until the numbers blurred into a gray haze. I checked the transaction history. One massive wire transfer, executed 48 hours prior. The recipient? St. Clair Wedding Services and Events. I drove home in a trance. I found David in the kitchen, casually scrolling through his phone. When he saw my face, white as a sheet, eyes wide, he didn't ask what was wrong. He looked at the floor. That was my first answer. "Where is the money, David?" I asked. My voice sounded like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Maya, listen," he started, moving toward me, but I stepped back. "It's a loan. Just a short-term loan. Mom was in a total panic. The venue was going to cancel Chloe's reservation because the final payment was due. And Marcus's family, they're traditional. If they found out the St. Clairs couldn't cover their half, the whole engagement would have imploded." "My surgery is in 3 weeks, David," I whispered. "That was my life. You gave my life to a florist?" "It's not like that," he snapped, his guilt turning into defensiveness. "Mom said you look great lately. She said the doctors are just being overly cautious. She promised that once the wedding gifts come in, and you know how wealthy Marcus's friends are, we'll have the money back in the account with interest. You can just push the surgery back a few months." I felt like I was looking at a stranger. Before I could respond, his phone buzzed on the counter. It was a speakerphone call from Beatrice. He answered it, and her voice filled the room, sharp and entitled. "David, darling, tell me you handled Maya," Beatrice chirped. "I just saw the wire cleared. The floral wall is confirmed. It's going to be a dream. Honestly, Maya is being so dramatic about this surgery. She's in remission, for heaven's sake. She can wait 6 months for a cosmetic touch-up. Chloe only gets one wedding, and I won't have her big day ruined by Maya's what-if scenarios. Don't let her drama ruin this for us." David looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to stay quiet. Into the phone, he said, "I know, Mom. I've got it. I'll handle Maya." He hung up and looked at me. "See? We're going to be fine. It's just a few months, Maya, for the sake of the family." "The family," I repeated. In that moment, the fortress I thought we had built didn't just crumble, it vanished. I realized that to the man I loved and the family I had served, I wasn't a person. I was a piggy bank with a heartbeat. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the porcelain vase Beatrice had gifted us for our anniversary, and I didn't pack a suitcase in a manic blur. Instead, I did something far more dangerous. I went to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and let the engine idle in the driveway for 45 minutes. The warmth left my body in waves. It was a physical sensation, a cold snap that started at my fingertips and settled deep in my chest. For 3 years, I had been Maya the patient, Maya the supporter, Maya the giver. But as I watched David through the kitchen window, casually pouring himself a glass of juice as if he hadn't just signed my death warrant, that version of me died. The forensic auditor took her place. I realized then that Beatrice and David viewed my life-saving money as a slush fund for a party. To them, my survival was a line item that could be deferred, a budget cut to balance the books of Chloe's vanity. They wanted to play games with high-stakes financing? Fine. I would treat their royal wedding exactly like a failed business venture, one ripe for a hostile takeover. I wiped the last of the salt from my cheeks and checked my reflection in the visor mirror. I didn't look like a woman who was dying. I looked like a woman who was about to go to work. I walked back into that house with a smile that didn't reach my eyes and found David. "You're right," I told him, my voice as smooth as glass. "Family comes first." I called the hospital. I told them I'd manage and to release my surgical slot. If Beatrice needs help with the final coordination, tell her I'm in. I have a knack for numbers, after all. Let's make sure Chloe gets exactly what she deserves. David sighed with relief, thinking he had managed me. He had no idea I had just started the clock on his own bankruptcy. Beatrice was so blinded by her own reflection in the silver platters that she didn't see me coming. When I told her I'd handle the final vendor reconciliations, she practically pushed her laptop into my hands. She was overwhelmed, she claimed. Apparently, keeping track of silk napkins and oyster bars was draining her soul. She gave me every password, every login, and every contract, essentially handing me the keys to her kingdom while she went to a spa day. I spent the next 3 nights in my home office, the blue light of the monitor illuminating the path to her destruction. As a forensic auditor, I don't just look at the totals, I look at the metadata. I found that Beatrice hadn't just used the $52,400 from our joint account. She had also borrowed my identity. She had opened 2 new credit cards in my name, using David's access to my Social Security number, and charged another $18,000 in incidental luxury upgrades, the crystal chandeliers for the tent and the vintage champagne. I didn't call the police, not yet. I called the banks and reported the cards as stolen, but I requested they keep the investigation internal and silent for 72 hours. I told them I was working with a private investigator to catch the culprit in the act. Then, I logged into the wedding vendor portal. The balances were staggering. The catering bill for the lobster and prime rib was $22,000. The 12-piece swing band was $8,000. The venue itself, a historic estate on the water, had a final facility fee of $30,000 due on the morning of the event. All of it was scheduled to be pulled from the account containing my stolen medical funds. I didn't cancel the orders. If I canceled them now, Beatrice would have time to scramble, to beg Marcus's family for money, to find another way. No, an audit is most effective when it reveals a total lack of liquidity at the moment of peak expenditure. Using my wedding coordinator access, I contacted every single vendor through the internal messaging system. I told them there had been a security breach with the primary funding account. I provided them with a new temporary holding account for the final payments. This account was a private one I'd opened in my name only, using the last of my freelance earnings. I deposited just enough to trigger a pre-authorization success, about $100 per vendor. I set a digital kill switch. Precisely 10 minutes before the wedding vows were scheduled to end, my script would empty that holding account and close it entirely. When the vendors attempted to finalize the full payments during the reception, they wouldn't just get a declined message, they would get a formally flagged for fraud alert. I sat back, watching the confirmation emails roll in. I had redirected the entire financial flow of the St. Clair royal wedding into a dead end. Every lobster tail, every rose petal, and every note played by that band was now a debt Beatrice couldn't pay. The day of the royal wedding was as perfect as stolen money could buy. The sun hit the St. Clair estate just right, illuminating the $5,000 floral wall that had replaced my surgery. Chloe looked like a doll in her $12,000 gown, and Beatrice swirled through the 300 guests, basking in the reflected glow of Marcus's family fortune. I sat in the back row, wearing a dress I'd bought with the last of my secret savings, looking every bit the supportive, recovering wife. The ceremony was a masterpiece of ego, but as they reached the I do's, I felt the vibration of my phone in my clutch. My script had executed. The holding account was now a vacuum. As the couple walked back down the aisle to a triumphant crescendo from the band, the music suddenly jerked and died. A second later, the overhead chandeliers flickered and went dark. The emergency lights kicked on, casting a sickly, fluorescent pall over the room. The catering staff, who had been ready to wheel out the lobster appetizers, stopped in their tracks. The venue coordinator, a man I'd been assisting for weeks, walked straight to the head table. He didn't look happy. Beatrice started to screech about the technical failure, but he held up a hand. The payments for the venue, the music, and the food were all flagged as fraudulent 10 minutes ago, Mrs. St. Clair, he said, his voice carrying across the silent, shocked room. The bank has frozen the transaction. Until the balance is settled in full, in cash or certified check, the event is over. Beatrice's face turned a shade of purple I've only seen in medical textbooks. That's impossible. My son, David, tell him. David looked at me, his eyes wide with a dawning, horrific realization. I didn't wait for him to speak. I stood up and walked to the microphone at the front of the room. There's been no mistake, Beatrice, I said, my voice steady and amplified for every socialite in the room to hear. The money you used for this wedding was stolen from my cancer surgery fund. You decided a floral wall was worth more than my life, so I decided to audit the books. I've reported the identity theft to the police, and as of 5 minutes ago, I've filed for divorce from David. I walked over to the head table and placed the divorce papers directly onto Chloe's silk-covered lap. Happy wedding, Chloe. You're starting your new life exactly like your mother. Bankrupt. Outside, the blue and red lights of a patrol car were already pulling up the long driveway. Beatrice was facing grand larceny charges, and Chloe's new in-laws, horrified by the public disgrace, were already whisking Marcus away to discuss an annulment. I left them in the dark, surrounded by unpaid lobster and rotting flowers. 6 months later, I had my surgery in a different city, paid for by the settlement I won from the St. Clair estate. Every time I look at my surgical scar, I don't see a victim. I see the woman who balanced the books and finally realized she was worth everything.
Maya's journey reminds us that sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in a hospital wing, but across a dinner table. But now that the dust has settled on Chloe's royal wedding, I want to hear from you. At what point did David cross the line, or was Beatrice the only one truly beyond redemption? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Please keep in mind that the story you just witnessed was a fictional dramatization created for awareness and societal reform. While Maya's audit provided a satisfying ending, we share these extreme scenarios as a warning. Please do not attempt to replicate these schemes or legal maneuvers in your own life. Our goal is to highlight the devastating impact of financial abuse and family betrayal so we can prevent these patterns before they start. True justice is about setting boundaries before the damage is done. If you learned something valuable from this video, please subscribe and hit the bell icon to join us daily.